The fortress didn't crack, it drowned. And tonight, Reyes would steal a submarine or die in the attempt. The last thing Lieutenant Commander Sofia Reyes remembered was the thunderclap of an explosion. One moment she was in CIC aboard the USS Portland, eyes fixed on the shifting glow of sonar screens. The next, she was choking on salt water and diesel smoke, ears ringing as the deck buckled into fire. Survivors were hauled screaming into the dark, floodlights raking across shattered steel. Reyes tried to fight, but rifle stocks drove her down into the surf. By dawn, she was shackled, wrists raw, boots dragging over steel gangways into the enemy's underworld. Checking in. Warriors, where are you watching from? Uva, Europe, Australia. Let me know below. And if these untold military stories fire you up, make sure to subscribe so you're with us on every mission. To her captors, she wasn't a warrior. She was leverage. Reyes, 33, had logged over 1,200 combat hours across the Pacific and Mediterranean, an ear trained to read the ocean like scripture. Admiral Viktor Kravchenko, master of the Blackwater Complex, saw in her something rarer than gold, the knowledge to unmask submarines, decode acoustic signatures, and bend an entire naval theater. Execution would waste her value. So instead, she was taken down a dripping stairwell into a place few ever left breathing. The Blackwater Complex wasn't a prison. It was a labyrinth carved into Baltic cliffs, a dead submarine pen repurposed into a fortress of despair. Corridors echoed with tide and steel. Moisture bled through concrete, mildew and rust swallowing everything. Red floodlights burned eternal dusk into the cell blocks, a twilight that gnawed at sanity. For most, it was torture. For Reyes, it was intelligence. Every groan of hull plating, every drip, every distant sonar pulse, each was a clue in the ocean-sized puzzle she had already begun to solve. Admiral Kravchenko carried himself like a man who owned silence, scar through his jaw, eyes hard as black ice. His English was clipped, sharpened by vodka and discipline. He studied Reyes as though cataloging prey. Lieutenant Commander Sofia Reyes, he said slowly, savoring her name. You will give me sonar codes, patrol routes, submarine call signs, and then, his smile cut like a blade, you will be traded, like the pawn you are. Reyes met his gaze, chin steady. Her ribs throbbed. Her uniform still clung with seawater, but her voice was granite, name, rank, serial. She knew the drill. More importantly, she knew resistance wasn't only survival, it was reconnaissance. Every guard rotation, every echo of machinery, every shadow in Kravchenko's office became another thread in the map she was stitching inside her mind. When the door clanged shut, she leaned back into the cold steel and closed her eyes. She listened not to her breath, but to the world beyond the thrum of diesel engines. The faint sonar ping, the groan of something massive docking in the pen. Her captors thought they had drowned her beneath the waves. They hadn't realized sound itself was her weapon, and the quieter they forced her world to be, the louder her path to freedom became. They thought silence would break her, but inside Blackwater's walls, silence became her sharpest weapon. The guards shoved Reyes down a dripping stairwell, deeper and deeper, until the air thickened with salt and oil. Blackwater wasn't a prison above ground. It was a cage carved into the sea itself. Once a submarine pen, now a labyrinth of cells welded into rock and steel. Waves hammered hidden breakwaters, and the stench of rust, diesel, and mildew hung in every breath. To most, the ocean's voice was torment. To Lieutenant Commander Sofia Reyes, it was a code waiting to be broken. Floodlights glowed blood red along each corridor, conserving power, bending time into endless twilight. Prisoners shuffled in chains, faces hollowed by weeks without sun. Cameras tracked every corner. But the true warden was the sea pressing down from above. Escape by land was impossible. Escape by water was suicide. That was the legend of Blackwater. But Reyes didn't care for legends. She was listening. Admiral Viktor Kravchenko visited often, his boots echoing on the steel catwalks. He carried no whip. His tools were subtler starvation rations, interrogations that bled into dawn, the suffocating weight of being entombed below the tide. He had dissected NATO manuals, knew when hunger dulled reflexes, when light deprivation unraveled memory. Most prisoners broke in days. "Your Navy teaches you to hunt submarines," Kravchenko said, voice calm, deliberate. "But I command them. Give me patrol schedules, codes, and perhaps you will see daylight again." Reyes's answer never changed. Name, rank, serial. Her silence infuriated him, yet it also fascinated him. While others slumped in despair, Reyes mapped the cadence of boots across steel grates, the pulse of power surges when generators shifted, the mechanical hum of turbines pumping seawater through cooling pipes. By echoes she traced dock tunnels. By faint radio chatter she marked communications hubs. What was noise to everyone else became a living blueprint to her. One night, lying against the damp wall of her cell, a faint vibration trembled beneath her palm. Diesel engines, ballast pumps, the deep, rolling growl of a submarine sliding into dock. Blackwater wasn't just a prison. It was a staging ground. Submarines came and went beneath the fortress. And if subs could enter, something else could leave. On her 12th night in captivity, whispers reached her cell. A band of American prisoners in the adjoining block plotted escape. Their leader, a scarred Green Beret named Sergeant Jack Mercer, swore they could overwhelm guards during a shift change and vanish into the forest above. The men were desperate, but Reyes's eyes narrowed. Running into the woods was suicide. She had listened long enough to know there was another way, darker, riskier, but far deadlier. Because in Blackwater, the sea wasn't only a wall, it was a door. They thought the forest was their only escape, but Reyes knew better. The ocean held both the cage and the key. Whispers spread through the cell block. Sergeant Jack Mercer and his Special Forces men had been counting guard shifts, testing locks, bribing a kitchen worker with scraps of stolen rations. Their plan was desperate: storm the western gate at dawn, scatter into the coastal forest, and pray someone reached friendly lines to broken men. It sounded like salvation. To Lieutenant Commander Sofia Reyes, it sounded like suicide. She had tracked the Mi-24 Hind gunship circling overhead, listened to patrol boats prowling the coves, felt the sweep of radar searching the tree line. Running meant death, but warning them now would brand her a coward or worse, a traitor to their hope. So she stayed silent and listened deeper. For nearly 2 weeks, Reyes had mapped Blackwater through sound. Hinges rasping with salt told her which doors were weak. Flickering lights betrayed faulty wiring. The hum of turbines marked seawater cooling pipes, and beneath it all, she heard what Mercer hadn't: the cavernous groan of ballast tanks filling, the diesel heartbeat of submarines docking beneath the prison. Every time steel shuddered against the cliffs, it proved the fortress wasn't sealed. It was tethered to the sea, and tethered things could be severed. When the lights dimmed for night cycle, Mercer crouched near her bars, eyes fever bright with resolve. "We move tomorrow," he whispered. "Gate rotation at dawn. My men take the first tower. Your Navy, you know, comms. We'll need you once we hit the tree line." Reyes studied him, her silence sharp enough to cut. "If you reach the tree line, you'll last an hour. Patrols, thermal scans, dogs, you won't make it." Mercer leaned closer, jaw tight. "Then what rot here, I'd rather die swinging." His words spread like wildfire through the cells, heads lifted, desperate to believe. Reyes said nothing more. Not yet. At dawn, the breakout erupted. A shiv cut a guard's throat. Chains crashed to the floor, and prisoners surged toward the western gate. For a heartbeat. It worked. Then Blackwater woke. Sirens wailed. Searchlights carved the dark. A hind thundered overhead, cannons shredding earth and men alike. Screams tore through the mud. Hope burned out in seconds. Reyes hadn't moved. She watched from the shadows, calm as the slaughter unfolded exactly as she had predicted. Mercer stumbled back, blood and disbelief in his eyes. "You knew," he spat. "I listened," she said coldly. "And now you will too if you want to live." That night, the survivors huddled hollow-eyed in the dark. Reyes finally spoke. "The forest is death, but the sea." She pressed her palm to the damp floor. "Every submarine that docks here opens a vein tunnels, pumps, access shafts. They think water shields them. It can be our passage." Mercer's men exchanged uneasy glances. To them, the ocean was as merciless as the guns. "And if we drown," Mercer asked. Reyes's gaze didn't waver. "Then we drown fighting. But if we succeed, we leave in a submarine, not in chains." A silence heavier than steel filled the block. For the first time, Mercer didn't argue. Somewhere deep in the rock, the walls trembled, the groan of another submarine sliding into dock. Reyes closed her eyes, lips barely moving. That's not despair. That's opportunity knocking. And in that moment, the prisoners realized they weren't following a captive anymore. They were following a commander. They planned to flee through the forest. She planned to steal the sea itself. And when the submarine docked, Reyes knew the time for whispers was over. The cavern doors shuddered open with a grind of steel, flooding the chamber with salt air and diesel fumes. A Soviet-built Kilo-class submarine slid into its berth, black hull glistening under floodlights. Guard patrols lined the catwalks, rifles slung casual to casual. Reyes noted, they trusted the fortress, not realizing the fortress had already betrayed them. She crouched with Mercer and the handful of survivors in a drainage crawl space, bodies pressed against wet stone. Above them, boots echoed. Beneath them, seawater lapped. Reyes whispered, "This is it. 10 minutes window. Not more." Mercer's jaw tightened. He still didn't trust her plan. But after the slaughter in the forest tunnels, his men had no illusions. They followed. The guards moved like clockwork, predictable arcs, predictable pauses. Reyes traced their rhythm like sonar pings in her head. When one spotlight flickered, she slid from cover, silent as shadow. A chokehold, a muffled gasp, a body lowered soundlessly. She waved the others forward, bit by bit. They crept along maintenance ladders until the catwalk overlooking the submarine loomed before them. Below, sailors moved cargo crates through the open hatch. Reyes's pulse quickened. This was their entry. 2 guards left, she mouthed. Mercer nodded, sliding a stolen knife from his boot. Together, they struck. The catwalk cleared in seconds, leaving only the thrum of diesel engines and the yawning hatchway of salvation. The submarine steel smelled of oil and confinement. The narrow passage groaned under their boots as they descended. Reyes led with ruthless precision, every movement calculated. In the control room, 2 enemy officers spun in shock. Reyes didn't hesitate. Her sidearm coughed twice, dropping them before alarms could rise. Mercer's men fanned out, slamming hatches shut, securing compartments with desperate efficiency. It was chaos, shouts in Russian, boots clanging, doors banging. But chaos was Reyes's element. She barked orders with the calm cadence of a bridge officer. "Seal forward, bulkheads, cut their comms." That's when a voice rasped from the shadows. "Ma'am, over here." A thin man in rags stepped forward, eyes hollow but burning. Petty Officer Harris, Engineering Division, Fast Attack Subs, Atlantic Fleet. Reyes blinked. "A submariner, the missing piece. You can run her, not alone," Harris croaked, "but with guidance." "Aye, then let's steal their beast." Mercer gripped a bulkhead, staring at the panels. "You're insane." Reyes ignored him. Harris dropped into the engineer's station. hands trembling as he coaxed the machinery awake. Reyes leaned over his shoulder, reading dials, recalling every tactical drill where sonar officers had trained alongside sub-crews. She didn't know every lever, but she knew the language of sound, of pressure, of timing, and, with Harris to translate steel into motion, she could command the ocean itself. Lights flared, pumps groaned, ballast tanks emptied with a deep rumble. The submarine shuddered, then began to sink beneath the waves for the first time in 2 weeks. The prisoners weren't staring at bars, they were staring at freedom. But Admiral Kravchenko hadn't built his empire on complacency. Sirens howled through the cavern. Floodgates began to close, massive doors grinding to trap the submarine inside. Guards fired blindly from the catwalks, bullets pinging off steel. Reyes shouted, "Dive now!" Harris yanked levers, engines roaring. The vessel pitched downward, slipping beneath the waterline. The floodgates slammed shut behind them seconds too late. In the control room, drenched in sweat, Reyes exhaled. For the first time. Escape wasn't theory, it was real. Then a sonar ping echoed through the cabin. Once, twice! Mercer stiffened. What is that? Reyes's eyes darkened. Hunting call. Kravchenko's patrol subs are already in the water. The men froze as the ping grew louder. Closer, like a predator circling unseen. Reyes whispered, almost to herself. We stole their beast. Now let's see if we can outrun its pack. The sea was quiet, too quiet, and when the sonar pings grew into a hunting chorus, Lieutenant Commander Sofia Reyes knew freedom had only bought them a harder fight. The submarine shuddered as depth charges exploded above, each blast rattling bolts and nerves alike. Prisoners clung to railings, faces pale under red emergency light. Mercer barked orders, but his eyes kept cutting back to Reyes. She stood at the helm beside Harris, scanning instruments, listening with every fiber of her training. The Kilo class was enemy steel, hostile in every sense. But she bent it to her will through sound and instinct. Hold course 20 degrees down, she snapped. Ride beneath their pattern, not through it. The vessel groaned as it plunged deeper. Metal creaked. Air thinned. Sweat beaded every brow. Another sonar ping screamed across the cabin. Mercer slammed a fist against the bulkhead. They're on top of us, Num, Reyes murmured, eyes sharp. They think they are, at the last second. She signaled Harris. Engines cut. The sub drifted silent into the abyss. A phantom slipping beneath the hunters, above. Charges detonated into empty black water. The crew held their breath until the ocean stilled again. Whispers filled the silence, disbelief, awe, relief. Reyes didn't celebrate. She calculated. Hours later, the battered submarine surfaced under the cloak of dawn. The coastline of Raven Rock Forward Base shimmered on the horizon. Reyes keyed the comms, voice steady. This is Lieutenant Commander Sofia Reyes, U.S. Navy, commanding a captured Kilo-class submarine with 13 American prisoners on board. Request immediate clearance. The line hissed, then a stunned reply. Lieutenant Commander, confirm. Did you say you hijacked an enemy submarine? Her answer was calm, final, confirmed. Blackwater Complex destroyed. All Americans accounted for. En route home. The cabin erupted not with cheers, but with silence heavy with realization. They weren't just survivors. They were witnesses to a legend. 6 months later, Reyes's mission was etched into Navy history. Promoted to commander and awarded the Navy Cross. She became more than an officer. She was living proof that innovation could turn captivity into conquest. Admiral Kravchenko's fortress had been his pride. Now it was his shame. Whispered about in every hostile command post from then on. Capturing an American officer wasn't a trophy. It was a risk that might burn down your empire. But Reyes never glorified medals. At Raven Rock, She trained young aviators in seer survival, evasion, resistance, escape. Her mantra was simple: any cage can become a weapon if you refuse to break. So the question lingers: how many times have you been underestimated, stripped of power, written off as defeated when inside? You carried strength no enemy could measure. That was Kravchenko's mistake. He thought he'd captured a pawn. In truth, he'd locked away a queen. And when the board flipped, it wasn't just his prison that collapsed. It was his empire. Because the deadliest weapon a sailor carries is the moment their enemy believes they already control her. Medals will fade. Empires will fall. But the courage forged in silence that endures beyond every battlefield